Tonight, the Prime Minister and the Defence Secretary leave Labour conference early, both dealing with fears of an all-out war in the Middle East. An emergency Cobra meeting's been held about getting British people out of Lebanon and what the plan is if things escalate. While Keir Starmer tells conference he is heading straight to the UN General Assembly in New York, where he'll call for restraint and de-escalation. His big domestic message: I will deliver change, but it won't be easy.
This is a long-term project. I've never pretended otherwise. But conference, make no mistake, the work of change has begun.
So has Starmer done enough to calm his party from any early government jitters? I'll be asking the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. And after the Prime Minister makes an unfortunate gaffe during his speech, we'll look at how he isn't the only political leader to trip over his tongue. All that and more with Ayesha, Hazarika and Elvins, who will be with us for the next hour. It's Tuesday. I'm Sophy Ridge, live from the Labour conference in Liverpool, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Well, of course, this afternoon we had the traditional set piece of the Labour Party conference with the leader's speech, and we'll have lots more on that shortly. But as one official said to me earlier, the difference this year for the party is that for the first time in a long time, we're having to balance the politics with the job of being in government. And this evening, events in the Middle East are really underlining that challenge. This afternoon, the Defence Secretary, John Healey, left conference here in Liverpool to chair an emergency Cobra meeting. And tonight, the Prime Minister has also left early to head to the United Nations General Assembly in New York, where there are warnings from world leaders that Lebanon is now really on the brink. Well, we'll hear in a moment from our political correspondent, Mark Cohen, on the UK government response. Plus, our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, is at the UN in New York for us. But first, we can go to Jerusalem and speak to our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes. Deborah, what is the situation?
It's escalating, in a word. We've seen over the last week, started with these very secret mission to infiltrate the pagers and walkie-talkies of Hezbollah members, exploding them, an operation that's been blamed on Israel, but Israel has so far yet to claim publicly responsibility, and then escalating into very open warfare with intense strikes against Hezbollah targets up in the south of Lebanon, across the border from northern Israel, and then also in Beirut against senior Hezbollah commanders. Clearly an operation that has been a long time in the planning and the most significant offensive by Israel against Hezbollah since the 2006 war in Lebanon. It is intensifying even further. There have been more strikes today. Another senior commander claimed by Israel to have been killed in a strike in Beirut. Of course, the thinking now is how Hezbollah is going to respond. There have been an uplift in strikes by Hezbollah into Israel, the Iron Dome air defences working to defeat those strikes. Hezbollah does have a large arsenal of longer-range missiles that can reach deep into Israel, into Tel Aviv, for example. That kind of attack, I've been told, would trigger an even greater Israeli response. Of course, people are looking to the potential for a ground operation. The Israeli government has made clear that its aim for this operation is to re-secure its border in the north so that tens of thousands of Israeli civilians can return. It wants Hezbollah to push back behind a line that had been agreed back in 2006 after that last war between these two sides. But Hezbollah has so far resisted that request, that demand, and that is why the two paths are on this direct route to much bigger conflict, and that of course risks wider conflict in the Middle East, and that is why you're seeing this manoeuvring by the UK government and all governments that have people in Lebanon worried about the situation deteriorating further there and what that will mean for their nationals.
Deborah, thank you very much indeed. Deborah Haynes there on the developing situation, the escalating situation in the Middle East. Well, we can speak now to our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, who is in New York. And Dominic, Keir Starmer, of course, leaving Labour conference early to go to the UN General Assembly. What kind of atmosphere is he going to find when he gets there?
Yeah, what he's going to find here, I think, is a sense of deep concern, a lot of hand-wringing. There is a deep sense of worry about what is happening in the Middle East. But what I don't think he will find is a real sense of urgency, really, about the diplomatic intervention required to resolve this crisis. I mean, for Joe Biden, it is one of the biggest crises, overseas crises, of his time in office, just in the twilight months of his presidency. But the speech he gave was curiously flat, and I think to many observers, it was kind of tone deaf. We heard his sort of characteristic optimism about, he said, all ages have faced challenges and together, we're strong and we can get through them as we have in the past. But he talked about the peace deal, the ceasefire deal that his diplomats have tried to forge with others in the region. He said it's now just a time to finalise the terms of that deal. And that just sounds kind of discordant, really, compared to what is actually moving and happening in the Middle East, that is moving very fast. So while things are, as Debs was saying there, escalating at a dramatic pace in the region, the wheels of diplomacy here are grinding pretty slowly. Every leader or foreign secretary or foreign minister that we as a team have tried to ask about as they move through the corridors of the United Nations and the areas outside, none of them really have responded to us when we said, how concerned are you? I think there's a sense that people don't want to make matters worse by saying the wrong thing, but also a kind of sense that they don't really have ideas yet as to how to resolve this. We've heard from Israel, which is increasingly isolated here at the UN. They say their ambassador here, Danny Danon, told reporters earlier that his country does not want a ground invasion. It doesn't want a ground war. It just wants to have this resolved diplomatically. But so far, I have to say, there isn't this real sense of diplomatic urgency. We're going to have a UN Security Council meeting at some point this week that may allow the concern here to coalesce into something meaningful in a diplomatic sense, but we're certainly not seeing that yet.
OK, Dominic, thank you very much indeed. Dominic Waghorn there for us in New York. I'm joined now by our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen. And Tamara, you broke the story that John Healey was going to be leaving conference early. Just how much do you think it's dominating here?
Yes, I revealed at lunchtime that John Healey, the Defence Secretary, who had a packed schedule here in Liverpool, had returned to London to chair a COBRA meeting on the Middle East. He has finished that COBRA meeting now. I think the government's increasing concern is about British nationals who are in the region. They have been told for some weeks now that they should leave by any means possible, but we believe there are thousands, somewhere up to 16,000 British nationals still in Lebanon. We know that some international operators have cancelled their flights, but there are still ways for them to get out of there. John Healey, when he left that meeting and spoke to our reporter in London, gave a strong hint, though, that the government was looking at what it might do with them, depending on how things pan out there. This is what he said.
Well, our concern is always for the safety of British nationals, and our advice to them is to leave Lebanon now. That hasn't changed. And this was a meeting simply to make sure that we've got plans in place for future developments.
Now, of course, it's been widely reported that there could be an evacuation of British nationals, as there had been in Afghanistan and Sudan last year. Of course, that would be a last resort for the government. Many of them may be dual nationals and not want to leave, but the government's firm advice at the moment, they're not confirming any of that, is that they should leave by any means possible. We know that yesterday the US announced that they were sending more troops to the region out of what they called an abundance of caution as to what might happen next. We haven't yet had any confirmation from the UK side that we're sending any more troops to the region, but it's certainly a source of increasing concern in government about how this might escalate in the coming days, and I think that's what this reflects.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Tamara Cohen there for us. Now, just before we move on with the programme, I just want to go back to Jerusalem and can talk again to you, Deborah Haynes. You're saying, Deborah, that it's a fast-moving situation. You have an update, do you?
Yes, well, we've obviously been in this situation with regards to concerns about British nationals in Lebanon over the summer, and at that time there were 2 British warships in the region that were on standby to be used in any evacuation operation. The government moved hundreds of troops to an RAF base in Cyprus, which would be instrumental in helping to receive any British evacuees as part of an operation. It's a finely tuned plan that's been in place for months now, and I understand that given the escalating tensions, you've had this Cobra meeting today. There was another Cobra meeting on Friday that was chaired by the Foreign Secretary, and I get a sense that there is going to be a ramping up again of these efforts to be prepared for any possible evacuation. It doesn't mean that one is imminent, but it does just reflect this sense of increasing concern and an absolute need by the government to ensure that it has people in place to respond should the worst happen and an evacuation operation be ordered.
OK, Deborah, thank you very much indeed. And there will be more on the situation in the Middle East on The World with Yada Hakim on the show tonight. She's speaking to the Secretary-General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, and the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, who are among those meeting for the UN General Assembly in New York. That's at 9 p.m. here on Sky News. Right, let's talk about Labour conference now, where Keir Starmer has given his first conference speech as Prime Minister. It wasn't exactly a victory lap, though, with a backdrop of warnings over the state of the public finances and falling approval ratings. Keir Starmer's message was essentially, stick with me because I'm sticking to my plan. It won't be easy, he said, and he's prepared to be unpopular. We'll look now at our first report by Sky's political editor, Beth Rigby.
Keir Starmer, Prime Minister and leader of the Labour Party.
This the welcome. Keir Starmer, the first Labour Prime Minister in 15 years to address Labour conference. Warmth in the room for a politician who's now getting a much cooler reception beyond.
Thank you.
Here to show his first 80 days of leadership has been a success.
Make no mistake. The work of change has begun. Planning reformed. Doctors back in theatre. New solar projects. The Renters Reform Bill, stopping no-fault evictions, and the Railway Services Bill, bringing railways back into public ownership. And we're only just getting started.
Change begins the mantra, but not much new on the missions. A massive majority, but modest announcements on veterans' access to housing and a permanent home for GB Energy in Aberdeen.
I think this guy's obviously got a pass from the 2019 conference.
The now semi-regular protest moment handled deftly. But this blunder on escalating tensions in the Middle East, a horrible gaffe.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
After weeks of warning about the pain to come, the PM trying to land a message about the prize.
And the truth is that if we take tough, long-term decisions now, if we stick to the driving purpose behind everything we do, then that light at the end of this tunnel, that Britain that belongs to you, we get there much more quickly.
But Starmer stumbling already, caught in a row around corporate hospitality and clothing freebies, undermining his promise to do things differently.
We must build a new Britain, built from that age-old spirit of creativity and enterprise, the pride and ambition of working people, that when matched by a government of service, a decisive government, a government prepared to use its powers for justice, opportunity and equal respect, can deliver a Britain that belongs to you. A Britain that belongs to you because politics sees public service as a privilege, not privilege as an entitlement to public service. Thank you, conference. Thank you.
That should have felt like a victory lap, and of course the hall is on his side. But in truth, the hope, the hunger of last year's conference is now giving way to the hard reality of governing. There has been criticism around some of you two have been involved in it, about this being a government of self-service and all the freebie stuff. What do you say to that?
Well, hopefully, by the announcements that the Prime Minister made and what we've been doing to make sure we change the planning reforms, we've got the infrastructure we need, as Rachel set out, about how we could change the economy so people have more money in their pocket.
How distracting has been rows over freebies and charges that he is leading a government of self-service?
No, I think we turned the page on that today, and I think...
In what way?
That was an important part of conference, and the critical argument at the heart of both the Chancellor's speech yesterday and the Prime Minister's today.
Do you expect this government to get more unpopular as time goes on?
We will not shy away from taking the tough decisions if people stick with us. The prize that is on offer is a country where everybody has the chance to live the bigger lives that they deserve.
Keir Starmer wants to lift voters' eyes back to the horizon, to the light at the end of the tunnel. But after 4 days in Liverpool, there's remarkably little joy for a newly minted government. He talks a lot about change. He now needs action. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Liverpool.
We can talk now to Sky's Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, who joins us now. Sam, what's your sort of reflections on conference?
Well, there are always multiple audiences for a conference speech. And when it comes to viewers at home, voters, I'm not sure that this conference speech is actually really, if we're being honest, going to be remembered in a week or a month or a year, perhaps apart from when he misspoke about wanting the return of the sausages. However, I think far more interesting was the speech for the likes of you and me and in the hall, because we are still picking over Keir Starmer to try and understand what kind of politician he is and what kind of direction he wants to take the country in. Because if I'm being honest, I don't always know what his end destination is. And on that, I felt the speech gave us some fascinating clues, because time and again he came back to the subject of justice. Justice, whether it was for Grenfell, justice for those who have no accommodation but had served in the army. That thread of justice, which when you read biographies of Keir Starmer came through strongly but didn't feature at all in the election campaign, has now revved back front and centre of his premiership. Social justice, a big part potentially of where he could go. But, Sophie, if he is going to be a Prime Minister of social justice, that costs money. So much of this speech was about broad brush direction, but not how we're going to get to the eventual destination, but is that actually where we're going? The social justice Prime Minister.
Oh, we'll find out, won't we? Sam, thank you very much indeed. Sam Coates, their analysis from our Deputy Political Editor. Well, a little early today, I spoke to the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, to get his reaction to the speech. I'm pleased to say we're now joined by the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, for a bit more analysis of the speech. What did you make of it?
Well, I think the Prime Minister came into Labour conference having spent the summer talking about the need to fix the foundations in our country and being honest with people about the dire situation we inherited. I think he came into this conference wanting to describe the house he wants to build on those foundations, and I think he did that with a speech that was actually visionary and full of hope and optimism and a plan. And I think you also saw from Keir, like the steel, the grit, the determination. We're used to coming to Labour conferences and seeing that steel from Keir Starmer, because he gripped this party from the abyss of one of its worst defeats and changed the Labour Party. And I think we can see today now a Labour Prime Minister who has the grit and steel to change the country.
I guess my question is, how optimistic was it really? You know, you kind of looking at some of the language, you're saying it won't be easy, I'm going to have to make unpopular decisions, it's going to be hard. I mean, it sounds, if this is Keir Starmer's version of optimistic, then what's his version of pessimistic?
No, do you know what? I think people will take real comfort in the honesty. We've had for years in this country now, government by gimmick, short-term sticking plasters, self-service, not public service, and people want a Prime Minister who's going to level with them, who's going to explain how we get from the Britain we have today to the Britain we want to build in the future.
His approval ratings don't seem to suggest that, though. They've been going down ever since, haven't they? Maybe people do want a bit more hope and optimism.
Well, I think they got that from the speech today, and ultimately we're going to be judged by our actions, not by our words. We stood on a manifesto for change at the general election. We're going to deliver that manifesto. Keir set out the ambition today for a decade of national renewal, and we know that we'll only be able to deliver that decade if we win not just a first-term Labour government, but a second-term Labour government. And therefore, you know, we're going into the next general election having not yet earned a single vote. And we believe very strongly through experience that votes aren't owned, they're earned. And what Keir is doing is, with the same steel and grit and determination he showed as leader of the Labour Party, he's now showing the same again as leader of our country to deliver the change that people are crying out for.
Can I ask a question that might seem quite stupid? What does national renewal actually mean? Because I feel like it's one of these phrases that gets thrown around all the time. What is national renewal?
Well, it means a country where fundamentally, whoever you are, wherever you're from, you have the same opportunity and security in life as people from the wealthiest backgrounds. So if you look at our 5 big missions for the government, it's sort of getting growth back into the economy, and not just more growth, but fairer growth, where everyone gets a fair share of the national wealth, to build a health and social care system fit for the future, of smashing through the class ceiling to give kids from working class backgrounds like mine the same opportunities in life as those from the wealthiest background, to take back control of our streets so
it means
people
everything
feel
then.
safe, and our energy security. No, these are 5 big challenges, 5 big missions, but you've got the leader there, the team, and the plan to deliver that vision.
He spoke a lot about service. He said service, I think, 18 times in the speech. If he's positioning himself as the guy who's cleaning up politics, do you think that, I guess, is why the donations and freebies story has shown some cut through? Because he's basically saying, I'm the guy who's here for the right reasons, unlike all the other guys. But in that case, you have to judge him to a higher standard.
Well, I think it's about transparency and accountability. So on political donations, of course, especially when you're in government, you have to make sure that you're behaving in an ethical way. But what I don't think we say enough in this country is that people who give to political parties to fund our politics are showing the same philanthropic spirit as people who give to charity. I think it is actually a noble pursuit. I think it is a good thing to do. The alternative is taxpayer funding of political parties, and I think taxpayers want their taxes spent on public services, not spent on politics.
Some people would completely disagree with that, though, right? They might say, look, if you're giving to a homeless charity or something, then that is for all the right reasons. And a lot of people, they would say, actually give to political parties for influence.
Except that, in my experience, both in terms of people who've donated to me to fund my campaigns, or staff in my office in opposition, or the Labour Party donors that I've met over the years, all they've ever wanted is to see Labour values put into action through power and through winning government. They've never asked for anything in return. These are people who support the Labour Party because they share our values. And what the Conservatives tried to do at the last election was increase the spending limit, because they thought they would raise the money and we wouldn't. And instead, we put a huge effort into building support from a really great team of people who donated their money in the case of financial donors, but their time as Labour members to do something which is noble in our country, which is politics and democracy. And I know it hasn't felt like politics has been a noble profession in this country for some time. I was elected in 2015. I feel like I've lived through some of the worst chapters in British political history, but I still believe, with the same optimism that I felt 20 years ago when I first came to to Labour Party conference, that politics is a force for good. And politics is a force for change. And I think we will show that through our actions during this Parliament, not simply our words.
I've got a couple of questions I want to ask you about the health service as well, because it's such a huge thing for conference and the country. And of course, I know you've got your speech tomorrow. You are not going to be able to give too much away about it. One of the big achievements was striking a deal with striking workers, right, when you first became Health Secretary. And yet, yesterday, we saw the Royal College of Nursing rejecting the government's 5.5% pay offer right in the middle of Rachel Reeves' speech. Have you been a bit played by the unions, giving them these big pay rises, and then they might just end up striking anyway?
It was important to me to settle the junior doctors, now resident doctors, strikes, because we'd seen billions of pounds wasted on the costs of the strike, more than 1.5 million cancelled operation appointments and procedures. And it was in the interest of patients to get those staff back to work, and the interests of the future of the profession, that people who are at an early stage of their medical career should feel optimistic and hopeful about the future. So I'm proud of the fact that within 3 weeks I did something the previous government couldn't do in 18 months.
You know, the Royal College of Nursing, I spoke to them yesterday, they said, yeah, striking is always in our toolkit.
It's always in any trade union's toolkit, but I don't think nurses in this country fundamentally want to be out on strike. I think they wanted to send a new government a message about their experience with the previous government. And I'm looking forward to working with the Royal College of Nursing, other nursing unions, and with nurses to make sure that they are working in an NHS that they can be proud of in all times, in all places. And at the moment, despite the brilliant dedication of nurses in our country, one of the things that they are really angry about, beyond their own pay and conditions, are the conditions that they are working in. And the sense of moral injury they feel when they bust their guts for their patients and feel their best isn't good enough because the NHS is in such a state and they feel powerless to do anything about it. I see them as part of my team, actually. I'm not going to be able to change the NHS on my own. I've got to mobilise a team of people right across the country, and I'm in their corner, and they're in mine too.
One more thing to ask you. Banning smoking outside pubs. It was kind of floated, it was discussed, went a bit quiet. What's going on? Is it going to happen?
We'll be publishing the tobacco and vapes bill shortly. We've got to take action on smoking. It's still the biggest killer in our country, and I'm concerned not just about the harmful effects of smoking directly, but the harmful effects of second-hand smoke as well. And look, I'm up for it.
Come on, give us a clue. What's happening?
I'm looking forward to the debate on this.
You floated, went quiet, come on, it's had a...
Well, I think there was a leak to a newspaper and we don't comment on leaks.
Oh, right,
but look, you can expect from me bold action on public health and prevention, because it's public health reform as well as health service reform that's going to get our NHS not just back on its feet, but making sure it's fit for the future. And if we don't do that, we won't have a national health service, and I'm not going to be the person who lets that happen. I'm going to be the person who takes the NHS in the worst crisis in its history, gets it back on its feet and fit for the future, and not on my own, but with millions of health and care workers right across the country who share this government's vision and ambition.
My interview there with Wes Streeting. Right, let's bring in our duo for this evening, shall we? The former Labour political advisor, Baroness Ayesha Hazarika, and the founder of Ecotricity and the Labour Party donor, Dale Vince. Great to have you both on the programme here in Liverpool. Ayesha, I'm interested in your thoughts on how Keir Starmer has done, because it was a difficult backdrop to this conference speech, right? His approval ratings haven't been great. He himself has been talking about the challenges of the public finances. Do you think he did enough to, I guess, set out an optimistic future?
Well, look, I think he kind of set a kind of tone which didn't dwell on the bad headlines, but slightly referenced them and sought to move on for. I thought it was quite interesting at the beginning of his speech. He said quite a strong message to his critics, and I think he's got quite a few critics, and I think he would acknowledge that, where he said, look, you know, all the attacks on me, it's like water off a duck's back. I'm going to be focused on the job. So I thought that was like an interesting kind of signal at the beginning of the speech. He didn't go into all the sort of rows about freebies and Sue Gray and all of that sort of stuff. But I sort of felt this was a really, really kind of interesting speech from him, because he was very much in prime ministerial mode. It wasn't a victory lap. It wasn't jubilant. It wasn't like, yeah, me punching the air, look how great I am, we did it, I did it. He did a little bit of that. And to be fair to him, you know, the mood at this conference, of course, we're in a bubble, but there is some feeling of celebration because this is a historic moment, right? There's only ever been 7 Labour prime ministers in the whole of history. Only 4 of them have won a general election. But I felt that his message was still, you know, quite a tough message. It wasn't sunny uplands now. It was basically saying we have got some really difficult decisions to make. He referenced the winter fuel allowance. He said, I understand that there's a lot of anger and upset about it. So I thought he showed a bit of empathy. But his central message was, look, there are no easy decisions and we're going to have to be really, really tough on things. So I thought it was him just really inhabiting the skin of Prime Minister. I think most people in the room know, look, they're Starmer supporters. You wouldn't pay all the money to come here if you didn't support him. And I think, funny enough, last year's conference was a bit more like buzzy and jubilant and kind of exciting and vibrant. But this year, everybody in the hall, and he knows, now the really hard work of government begins, and that is hard.
Yeah, it's true. There is a contrast in the atmosphere, definitely. What's your take, Dale? What did you make of it?
Yeah, I thought that Keir Starmer showed himself today to be a serious person, a serious leader of our country. He said he would make decisions in the interest of the country, even if it was at his own personal expense in terms of popularity. He talked about people needing to accept living near prisons, for example, living near pylons, for example, because they were in the national interest. I think he expressed very clearly his core philosophy, I think, which is service, public service. I think that came through. We haven't seen that for so long in our country. So I think there was a lot of good stuff in there. He was humorous. He showed a personal side with some news stories. He teased that he was about to talk about football, but he didn't talk about football, and that was funny. You know, I thought it was a good speech, and I think it was well pitched. We needed a bit of a pep talk. I think it had been doom and gloom before the conference, and you know, if he was a football manager, I think that was a great pre-game speech, you know, to the country to say, look, we can get here together, and it was about teamwork. He expressed that.
Can I ask you about something that Wes Streeting said about political donations? Because you obviously donated to, you know, the Labour Party, and I just thought it was interesting where Wes was like, "Look, I see political donors as just like donating to charity." Yeah. What do you think? Is that true, or is he putting it a bit thick? What do you reckon?
Do you know what? I think Les.
Les.
That's my sausage moment. I think Wes talks a lot of sense, and I think it needed saying that, you know, if we have a system in our country, and we do, whereby politics is funded by donations, then we have to accept that it's a good thing to do. And if it isn't a good thing to do, we should fund it publicly. I think it's wrong when people give money in order to buy influence and to get something back. That doesn't happen in the Labour Party, in my experience. I've never asked for anything, never been offered anything. And I think Wes is right. We have to stand up and say, listen, donating is OK. It is a public service because our politics is funded by donations.
What do you think on that one?
Well, I think the issue of money in politics is really, really difficult, whether you're looking at donations, whether you're looking at pay in politics as well. You know, a lot of the rows that we've had at the beginning of the week over the sort of pay of special advisors, and then people asking, you know, does the Prime Minister earn enough money? I always think there's always a very difficult mix between money and politics. Transparency is incredibly important, but I also think politicians do have to sort of think, how does this look in the outside world as well, particularly when people are really, really struggling at the moment. And while I think it's really good for people to donate, and I was actually just asking Dale beforehand, are you know, having lots of conversations with cabinet ministers? He said, no, actually, I'm not, and that's right.
That's interesting.
That's right. That's as it should be. Yeah. But I do think sometimes when you see, particularly, like, for example, we've criticised the Conservative Party for just the sheer amount of money. I think we just have to be mindful of how the sums of money look to the outside world.
Interesting.
And I think set against the taking away of the you know, the pensioner winter fuel allowance, I think that contrast was unfortunately timed.
Yeah.
Because it was a small sum of money given to him for a wardrobe makeover pre-election, relatively.
OK, thanks both. I'll have lots more from both of you on the programme as well. You're watching the Politics Hub coming up. After that unfortunate slip of the tongue by the PM during his keynote speech, we'll be taking a look back at other times politicians have fluffed their lives. And voters in Liz Truss's former seat at South West Norfolk booted out the Tories in June, but what do they make of Keir Starmer? Are they suffering buyer's remorse? We're on the ground in what was once the bluest of blue seats. Plus, how luxury British cars like these came to end up in Russia, despite sanctions apparently banning them. We'll have a special report after the break.
Gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are.
breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place, and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent. I've reported from around the world and around the UK.
I'm Mark Stone, I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, D.C. And beyond the United States, from across the world, I report on the biggest stories.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I remember some of the worst of the violence here.
I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Hello, welcome back to the Labour Party conference. Now, back in 2022, the UK was among the world's biggest economies to introduce sanctions against Russia, designed, of course, to try and hurt Putin's regime after the invasion of Ukraine. But a Sky News investigation has revealed that luxury British cars are still making their way onto Russian soil via neighbouring Georgia. Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, has taken a trip to the border to see what's going on.
The Caucasus mountain range in Georgia. With peaks higher than any in the Alps, this is the historic borderland between Europe and Asia. The road here snakes through the hills, up the valleys from the Georgian capital. And we've come here in search of a very particular vehicle. At first glance, there's nothing unusual about it, just a Range Rover on its way from the factory to its new owner. But this is a supply chain delivering sanctioned cars into Russia. And having spent days in Georgia looking for evidence of how these cars are passing through here, we finally ran into it. So we were on our way back from the border towards Tbilisi, the capital. And then, lo and behold, what did we run into but another car carrier carrying what looks like a brand new Range Rover. Soon enough, it was joined by a second Range Rover. Driving up, heading for the border, day gave way to dusk, and still we carried on north. As night fell, we arrived at a makeshift car park just a few hundred yards from the only crossing from Georgia into Russia, the Lars checkpoint. The Range Rovers were just part of a consignment of numerous luxury cars. Feels like it's kind of peak time now. There's one Range Rover being unloaded. Another one just came off that truck over there. There's a Lamborghini over there. So all of these cars arriving. We've spoken to one of the drivers, doesn't really want to talk on camera. He says he's just delivering these cars right now. And for the most part, they just stay here until potentially tomorrow, potentially a few days later. That's when they go across the border. The following morning, the car park had fallen quiet once again, but the cars were still there, waiting for the next leg of their journey. So we've checked the VIN numbers, the fingerprints essentially, on this car and the other Range Rover brought here overnight, and they both say the same thing. Made in Solihull in 2024, this year. In other words, 2 years after sanctions were imposed on Russia that were supposed to prevent these cars going in, here they are. And this is just one of a number of different routes taking items like this, and indeed weaponry and equipment, into Russia. It's happening in plain sight. Jaguar Land Rover told Sky News these cars were originally sold into a different country which doesn't share a border with Russia. It said JLR stopped sales of vehicles to Russia and Belarus in February 2022. It continues to adapt its compliance strategies to counter the efforts of third parties seeking to circumvent sanctions against Russia and Belarus. But here on the border, we found evidence of a well-oiled process, of people shifting cars here, then across the frontier,
one sanctioned vehicle at a time. No one hides it. They may not show up in the export data, but everyone knows what's going on. Ed Conway, Sky News in Georgia.
Ed has written an in-depth report on what he found out in Georgia. Just scan the QR code on your screen now to have a look. Coming up next on the Politics Hub. Well, Keir Starmer is not the only politician to mess up their lines in an important speech. We're going to be talking political slip-ups later in the programme. We're on the ground in Liz Truss's former constituency. Voters in south-west Norfolk swung to Keir Starmer back in June. But what do they think of him now? Hello, welcome back. Now, if you and your mates are as geeky as the Poll Hub team, you probably have conversations the morning after election night about whether you're up for South West Norfolk or not. Yep, Liz Truss's old seat was about as true blue as they come, but it swung to Labour in June. But after weeks of rows over freebie clothes, specs, cuts to winter fuel allowance, what do those newly won-over Labour voters now make of the Prime Minister? Sky's political correspondent Ali Fortescue has been speaking to some of them.
In the leafy Norfolk town of Downham Market, once True Blue, now Labour, you don't have to look far to find buyer's remorse.
Must be the most unpopular Prime Minister ever.
What do you think?
I think they're rubbish.
Truss, Liz.
A Prime Minister that knows a thing or two about being unpopular was a local MP here. Liz Truss lost in July by 600 votes, turning this seat red for the first time in 80 years.
I'm sure that Liz Truss's personal brand played a part here, but this is part of Labour's wider success story, flipping tribal Tory votes, knitting together that unlikely coalition. And that is why what people think in places like this matters.
Morning, it's Breakfast Society. This is Radio
Simon's
West
been
Norfolk.
broadcasting on Radio West Norfolk for 2 decades. If anyone knows what people here care about, it's him.
Do you think there were reasons kind of beyond Liz Truss why people turned to Labour?
I think so. People are a little bit disheartened, aren't they? So many promises that don't happen and all of the scandals, which unfortunately maybe seem to be starting again. So I think you just want something new.
There's another story here too. Reform came a close third. Now they're targeting not just Conservatives, but Labour votes too.
I think he's good. He's got so many good policies.
Nigel Farage?
Yeah.
Because they got a lot of votes here. Why do you think that is?
Well, there's not much to choose from with the other two parties.
Well, they sort of say one thing and then when they get in power, they do another. But the fact that this thing is Spencer's that came up, free gifts and all that.
So far, not particularly impressed with Keir Starmer?
So far, no. I mean, it could change, you never know. But then, the moon could move out of orbit.
I am a Labour supporter, but I believe that some of the policies that they've come out with are a bit misguided.
Do you mind me asking if you voted Labour?
I did for the first time in my life, but I changed my mind this year.
Would you vote Labour next time?
We'll see.
Because today I can confirm.
He's basically saying, bear with me and things will get better. Do you believe that?
You're just asking people to hope and have blindless faith again.
Keir Starmer redrew the political map, but with a landslide built on shaky foundations, it's minds beyond the conference walls in places like this he needs to win over. Ali Fortescue, Sky News, South West Norfolk.
Right, let's chat to Ayesha and Dale, shall we? Look, it's interesting, isn't it? Because in a way that seat shows how well Labour did at the election, right, flipping seats like that to Labour. But it also shows they've got a tough task holding on to them. Do you think it is, I guess, a majority built on shaky foundations, as Ali put it, Dale?
Well, I don't think so. I think there are a lot of unique circumstances around the last election. I think 14 years of Tory misrule that had made so many people fed up that seats like that did flip. Liz Truss, of course, was disastrous in her 1 month as Prime Minister. I imagine the local electorate had that in mind as well. I think it's early days for Labour. It's only 2 months in, barely, and there are a lot of things to fix. But I think there is a path. They have a plan. It is to grow the economy, and with that, then we can pay for the things that we need, fix the NHS, all of that kind of stuff. And I think it's way too early to be saying Labour have failed.
Look, I think Labour MPs, certainly, I've done lots of panels with new Labour MPs, and some of them have tiny majorities. I spoke to one Labour MP, just 39 votes in it, another one just over 100, right? So I think when you speak to them, they are really aware of just how fragile, their win was. It was a very, very big win, and we've won and get the chance to serve. But I think this is all going to be about delivery. It doesn't matter about polls right now, about Keir Starmer's popularity. It doesn't matter about speeches today and narratives. What it is, it's not about talking, it's about action. It's about doing the doings, actually getting on with things. And that's how Labour will kind of shore up its next election. But the next election is actually not that far away. There's really important elections in Scotland in 2026, where Labour will be hoping that Anna Sarwar will become First Minister. So Labour actually is under some pressure to make sure that it can show change, and we're here with the slogans all around us, change begins. It has to begin today, and as that woman said, I think the British public are reasonable. They were sick of the Tories. They've given Labour a chance, and as the great John Smith said, all we ask for is the opportunity to serve. But she said, we'll see, and that's for Labour to deliver.
I was interested when you said that Labour has got a plan, and that's growth. And with your kind of business hat on, what would you like to see in the budget? Because in many ways, that's when we're really going to see the proof of what this Labour government's all about.
I'd like to see relaxing or changing of the fiscal rules to allow borrowing for investment, because all businesses know that's how you grow. If you have a good project to spend money on that pays for itself, pays its own debt, that's a good investment. I'd like to see us able to do that as a country. I'd like to see an equalisation of the tax system, because we tax workers, people that just have a job, at a higher rate of tax than we tax people that earn money with assets, with money through investments and stuff like that. I'd like to see that levelised. Capital gains tax, for example, is half the rate of income tax. We could raise £12 billion a year if we were to do that. So I'm hoping justice in the tax system and changing the fiscal rules, because the rules are man-made.
I'll be honest, the fiscal rules thing, I feel like something's coming around. I mean, look, I've got no inside track on this, I should say, but just from what Rachel Reeves was hinting at in her speech, it feels like there could be, particularly that debt rule, perhaps a shift.
I totally agree with you. I feel that was the most interesting bit of Rachel Reeves' speech. And given that there has been a lot of criticism about doom and gloom and where's the hope, I think that was a very interesting signal. Now, I know it's very nerdy and it's very, very in the weeds, but it's really important, as Dale said. And this is something that, you know, very, very knowledgeable people from the world of the Treasury, like I had a conversation, in fact, on my podcast with Nick McPherson, who used to run the Treasury, you know, voices like him are saying, look, you could relax these fiscal rules. And a big part of Keir Starmer's speech was, he used this phrase, a Britain which belongs to you. And I think they could make a compelling argument about borrowing to invest in these things which will benefit all British citizens down the track.
One to watch out for.
Yes, watch this space.
Watch this space. You heard it here first on the Politics Hub. Thanks both very much indeed, Ayesha and Dale Vince there. Still to come on the Politics Hub. Back in government after 14 years with a stonking majority, conference should have been fun for the PM, but the threat of war in the Middle East, and not to mention rows over freebie specs and winter fuel, has taken the edge off slightly. And just when you thought it couldn't get much worse, a really bad clanger in his keynote speech. We're going to be looking at political gaffes next.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion that's just come down. I think it was a monster just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks and taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
There's been an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change.
We're being crushed. Free from wherever you get your news. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine. The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world. Sky News, the full story first.
Well, hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Now, Keir Starmer accidentally saying sausages when he meant to say hostages, just as he built up a head of steam in today's keynote conference speech, was, well, beyond unfortunate. It's been a long week for the Prime Minister, but safe to say his advisers probably didn't have that particular misstep on their bingo cards. It's going to be a long train journey back to North London, and it got us thinking about some other memorable moments when politicians didn't quite get their words right.
The point of raising taxes is to pay for public services. We are raising more money for the rich.
We want to lead the world in preventing tourism.
And we not only save the world, save the banks and save...
This is the work I will do as Foreign Secretary, banging the drum for Britain abroad.
Mark my words, we will make Brexit a success. Now that's one word that wasn't meant to come out like that, was it?
That's bringing our joy for tonight, Ayesha and Dale. Honestly, we've all done it, right?
We've all done it, and it was just such an because it was a really serious part of the speech. It was really important what's happening in Gaza, but then it was just, and everyone was going, did he actually see? And also, look, you know, I've been coming to conferences for a long time. As a feminist, I sometimes think Labour conference is a bit of a sausage fest, but we didn't expect to see literally the word sausage. Everyone's like...
Brilliant.
I got a feel from him. He must have just, like, he was probably just hoping in his head, oh, it can't have been that bad, and then just hear it back and you're like, oh, no, that wasn't
Also,
great.
I think when you're in the moment like that, you've got no choice but to plough on. You've just got to, like, literally, either you stop and make a joke about it, but because of the seriousness of the nature, you can't just be like, ha, 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 laugh it up. So he just would have been like...
Maybe
in the moment.
I didn't see any reaction.
He might have missed it. It's true.
I missed it, actually.
It's true. It's at the time I half missed it as well. And also, to be honest, I've definitely misspoken on air. Unfortunately, all my gaffes are actually too expletive-ridden to actually put on TV to show you. But at times, I've said things without realising.
Of course, and also, I mean, John Prescott famously used to sort of make all these gaffes. I mean, he did one on the radio, and I think I might have done expletive and said, is this a pre-record or a live? And they were like, it's a live. But look, these things can happen. I remember when I was working with Ed Miliband, and he made a speech which he memorised. He didn't even have notes, so he committed it all to memory, and then, you know, we were all following it, you know, as the press officers and the advisors, and then it got to the section on the deficit, which was really important for the Labour Party. The Tories were attacking as hard on the deficit reduction plan, and he completely forgot the whole chunk on the deficit, and we were all just reaching for each other's hands going, what's going on, what's going on? So these things can happen. I remember Theresa May, where all the things started falling off the...
Yeah, the things off the stage.
Yeah, and she had her coughing fit, and someone gave her a P45, so...
And then things get in your head as well, like the breakfast Brexit one. Like the first guy did it, and then I just remember there was a whole series of other people just saying breakfast when they meant Brexit.
Yeah,
I just done it again.
The other thing was Jeremy Hunt became quite a difficult thing.
Let's not even...
Yeah, I mean, I'm just putting it out there, sorry. I'm just saying, I mean, I felt sorry for everybody involved in that.
Yeah, let's not have that one on our minds.
I love the idea that maybe the auto cue was sabotaged.
Oh, that's
fun.
a good conspiracy theory.
I like it a lot.
But it's fine for you because you're a vegetarian and vegan, so you don't have any sausages anyway.
I love sausages, but obviously not meat ones.
So we've got another day of conference, of course. Keir Starmer leaving today. But how do you think conference has been, Dale? What do you think the atmosphere's been like?
I think it's been less exciting and excited than last year, for sure. I think I understand why. You mentioned it earlier. The election has been won. This time last year, it was we were waiting for it to happen. The serious business of government has begun. I think if this government so far has a failing, it's in comms. It's not in the doing. There's been a lot of policy doing. But I think this is a government that won't be flashy. It won't be showy. It'll get on with the job. And I'm enjoying what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and you'll be at Conservative conferences.
I certainly will. Living the dream.
See you there. Thanks both very much indeed, Ayesha and Dale there. Well, that is it from us tonight. I'll see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. But up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane Mee. That's all from us for tonight, at least, from Labour conference in Liverpool. But we'll see you tomorrow with more Politics Hub.